I'm Lynn Hughes of Wanderlust, and I'll just say a few words more in a minute. But first of all, I think just so we can get an idea about everyone joining tonight, we'd love to know how many of you have been to Guyana. Now, I know it looks like a few of you are actually in Guyana, but let's find out how many of you have actually been to Guyana. So we're going to do a quick poll. So if you could just quickly fill that in. As you can see, it's very simple. Yes, you've been. No, but it's definitely on your list. Or no, that you're kind of intrigued and want to find out more tonight. We'll see if we can persuade you. Okay, so although numbers are changing slightly, basically around 13%, 14% have been, or of course are there. 48% say it's definitely on your list, and 39% no, but you're intrigued, you want to know more. Brilliant. Okay, it's always good, like I say, to have a bit of an idea. Okay, so thank you very much for that. So yes, as I say, I'm Lynn Hughes, and I'm the founder and editor of Wanderlust. And for years, I've been hearing about this amazing place called Guyana. And I'd actually planned to go there a few years ago, but that trip fell through, which was very disappointing. But I finally got to go there last year, and gosh, I certainly wasn't disappointed. And the first morning set the scene. We took a small plane to the country's northeast, and I just remember looking out, and all I could see in every direction, as far as the eye could see, was rainforest, just unbroken rainforest. And for somebody like me, who admittedly has travelled a lot, it was still so special to see that sight. And I knew I was going to love Guyana as much as I thought I would. And every day of that trip was special. I was there about 10 days, and wish it had been longer. We certainly crammed a lot in. But each day brought a new experience, whether it was some incredible wildlife viewing, critters such as giant otters, for instance, giant river otters, which I'd always wanted to see, but lots of other special animals too, and birds. And then there were the people too, staying in community lodges, meeting local people, and had a great time, and not long enough perhaps, in the capital, Georgetown too. So really, really special. So I'm delighted that we're doing this evening tonight. I've been an advocate for Guyana ever since I've been, and really was keen to do this evening and to hear from people who know far more about Guyana than myself. So we've got some great speakers tonight. So to give you a bit of an overview of what will happen, as I say, we've got a lot of speakers. They're going to have to talk very fast. We're going to be very strict with them. But during the evening, we'll be hearing from Nicola Balram of the Guyana Tourism Authority, from Helen Bryan of Wildlife Worldwide, who will talk to us about the wildlife and birds of Guyana, from Tony Thorne of Wilderness Explorers, who will talk about community-led tourism, Salvador de Caires, an expert guide. I loved meeting Salvador in Guyana, and Salvador will give us a quick overview of the culture and history. We'll also hear from Cameron Baksh of the Guyana Tourism Authority on what is new in Guyana. And although he can't join us live, we'll be having a short video of probably what's Guyana's celebrity chef, Delvin Adams of the Backyard Cafe, which anybody who goes to Guyana, so any of you, when you go, you've got to meet Delvin, you've got to eat his cafe, you've got to do a market tour with him. Highly recommended. And we will then hopefully have time at the end for a Q&A. So it'll be your opportunity to ask questions of our experts. So please do, as they're talking, please do start sending your questions in, either via the chat function or the Q&A function. And we appreciate we might only be able to get through a few of them, depending on time. But what we will do is tomorrow we'll be sending out an email to everybody who registered, and we'll be trying to answer more of the questions on there. So do make sure that you send them through. Anyway, before we hear from our speakers, just to get us in the mood, let's have a short video and just to set the scene.
As the world experiences a new norm, let's take a moment to slow down, to refocus, reimagine, dream. Let's dedicate the time to take it all in. We are gaining a fresh understanding of how connected we truly are, and gaining a new appreciation for all we have. The freedom to explore new places, meet new people, experience new things. We have much to be grateful for and to look forward to. Our friends and loved ones, the memories we share, the new experiences we will have, the new friendships we will make. Those days will return, and when it is safe to travel again, we will be here waiting for you, waiting to say, welcome back to nature. Welcome to Guyana.
Right, terrific. Now, we've had a couple of comments from people saying that it is rather fuzzy, the video for them. It will depend a lot on your individual internet connection, and we do unfortunately find that early evening in the UK, of course, is peak time. And so sometimes, even if they've run wonderfully during the day, they don't run quite as well at this time. So don't fret. Tomorrow, when we send out the follow-up email with the questions and so on, we will also have links to the videos. And in fact, we'll have a recording of tonight. So you'll be able to see the videos in, you know, whatever time suits you. And I think you'll find that you have much clearer resolution. So if you are one of the people. Somebody saying that otter was so friendly. The otters are very friendly, as a bit too friendly at times, as I found out. And yeah, so okay, so various opinions coming in on internet connections, but apologies for those people for whom it wasn't good enough, because it did run beautifully earlier. Right, okay, so we've got a lot to get through, so let's get on to the first speaker tonight. So it's a real privilege to introduce Nicola Balram from the Guyana Tourism Authority. And I've actually met Nicola in a few corners of the world, and she's a great ambassador for her home country. So Nicola, over to you. Can you please give us a bit of an overview of Guyana and what is happening there?
Thanks, Lynn, and good evening, good afternoon to everyone. I don't think anyone is on this call in the early morning hours, but if you are, good morning to you. I hope everyone has made themselves comfortable with the wine, the tea, or the rum that Lynn has been pushing us in the earlier bits of this call to get on. So like Lynn said, I work for the Guyana Tourism Authority. I am the Senior Marketing Officer there, and I've been with this agency for about 3 years now. And this particular job has opened my eyes to a lot this country has to offer, many things I didn't know from a local perspective as well. So I feel very fortunate to be able to be in this position and share it with you all. In my role here at the GTA, one of my major roles and responsibilities is working with a lot of our partners to meet travelers like yourselves to learn more about the destination that would love to come someday, that have been or want to learn more. And I think just to start off this presentation, we're just going to start off with some of my personal highlights to give you that perspective. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is me at Kaieteur Falls. Kaieteur Falls is one of our highest attractions here in Guyana. It's 741 feet, or about 226 meters tall, and it's one of the largest and most powerful single drop waterfalls in the world. To give a bit of a scale, it's about 4 to 5 times higher than Niagara Falls. I think this was a trip about last year, the year before, when I actually got to lead one of our groups that came here for marketing purposes. And although you're a local seeing this, it affects you the same way as a traveler would. It's quite amazing and quite wonderful. One of the best things about this falls is that there is no rails, it's just you surrounded by nature, and the amount of people that come here are in those small groups. So you won't get those crowds as many other destinations would, and especially now with everything going on as well. Can I have the next slide? Can I have the next slide? Oh, there it is. Now, Guyana is a place that it's a melting pot of cultures, a melting pot of landscapes, and a lot of it you're going to find a little bit down as our presenters speak and teach you a little bit more about this destination. But these are two of my personal photos one is just from the everyday life that you're here in Guyana. A lot of our faces that you see here would come from 6 ethnic groups. And 3 of the main ones that you'll see along your travels are those of African, East Indian, and indigenous descent. And this was actually myself at an Indian wedding here in Guyana. And then on the photo towards your right is when I was in the rainforest on our canopy walkway in the Aracrama rainforest. So it's a great juxtaposition in terms of the more city lifestyle and the vibrancy of it, and then being surrounded by nature where it's just you and the birds and the trees and the animals there as well. Can I have the next slide? I think over the past year, we've been very lucky that our destination and the work that a lot of our agencies, tour operators, and the community work that we do here has landed Guyana many multiple awards. Last year, we actually got 6 awards. This was the very first where we were the best in ecotourism. And for a local and for anyone that's coming to see this as well, this has been based on a community-led and owned model that many of our indigenous peoples have taken to be their livelihood and the way that they communicate with the world and showcase what's around them as well. You're going to hear from a presenter later on that goes a little bit more in detail about this, and he can explain it in terms of all the senses and give you that better feel as to what it is. I'm very proud to say that for this year, we've actually won an award as well. We got the 2nd in the Best of Culture Award from the Americas, and we hope to continue along that path later on in the future as well. Can I have the next slide? I do anticipate, and that Lynn alluded to earlier, we do have quite a mixed audience, many persons from different areas of the UK, from the US, and some from Guyana as well. So to just shed some light on some of the basics to give you that idea of Guyana. Guyana is a country that's found in South America, but we have a strong Caribbean influence based on our history and culture, especially along the coastline. We're located between Venezuela, Suriname, Brazil, and the Atlantic Ocean. And we like to say that we're the perfect mix of Caribbean and South American. You get both of that in that aspect as well. Guyana is the only country in South America where English is the official language. This means that any communication and interactions you have with any of our peoples, especially in the more remote villages and the indigenous villages, will be without a translator, and you have that one-on-one experience with your guide, with the persons in the communities also. In terms of geographical region, we do have 3 main tourism or geographical landscapes. There is the flat coastland, the rainforest, and the savannas. Our coastline makes up about 10% of the overall landscape and is found to the most northern part of the country, and about 90% of our population live on that coastal strip. 80% of the landscape is pure, pristine natural rainforest, and a lot of this is rainforest that has not been touched or cut. And this is where many of our wildlife species and different species call their home, and where you can see many of the giants of Guyana. Some of these include like the jaguar, the arapaima, the otter that was seen in that same video earlier as well. From the UK, the most efficient route to actually get here is through Barbados. You can also travel through KLM, or that also has a connection with Suriname. And I know that they do partner with Copa Airlines that flies through Panama as well. You can also go through New York or Miami from the US and then come down to Guyana. And Olin talked about the climate. The birds always want to know about the climate. A lot of times, again, we say it's summer all year round, but we do have two main seasons. We have the peak or the dry season, which is that hot climate, and we also have our rainy season, but we like to call it the green season because it just brings everything a little bit more lush. We're actually in that rainy season right now. So along the coast and in the interior, we do have a lot of rainfall here right at the moment, but it makes our waterfalls so much more exciting to see. You get closer to all of the birding experiences, and the rainforest just comes alive during this time also. Guyana, for those of you that may not know, the word Guyana actually is an indigenous word meaning land of many waters. And we are pretty blessed here to have many rivers and waterways and about 300 waterfalls that we call home here. Can I have the next slide, please? How has Guyana been impacted by the global pandemic? I know this is a big question for everyone right now. So in terms of what the country was able to do, we were pretty lucky to close our borders on March 18th when it became a big issue, especially in the Western world. Because of this, we were able to limit a lot of our cases. Currently, we do have 396 positive or active cases with 20 fatalities. We are pretty optimistic that travel will return in the near future, in the coming months, but currently the airports are closed for international travelers until September 30th. We know it's a very fluid situation right now, and our Guyana Civil Aviation Authority that has the control over their airports are making these based on as that situation changes. As the situation updates, we always will keep every traveler, all of our tour operators informed, and we do try to make sure that everything is in keeping with what it has to be in terms of health and safety protocols, not only within the
Oh dear, I think, yeah, looks like we've lost, unfortunately, Nicola.
I'm back on now.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
I'm quite a lucky one, aren't I?
You've got an excuse. You're all the way in Guyana, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess it does show that like in the UK where everyone is online now, everyone is online at this point in time also.
Yeah.
As I was alluding to, I think we were talking a little bit more on the airport situations. On September 30th, it will be open up to travelers coming back into the country. And we are making every possible effort we can as a destination board with all of our partners to ensure that health and safety protocols are being put in place from all aspects of travel, from the minute you're planning your trip to the minute you get on the plane, also when you're traveling within the country with your operator and at the lodges that you stay at as well. Besides this, I think one of the very most positive things to know about Guyana is that we are a destination built for social distancing. With all of our vast open spaces, the amount of interactions that you do have, and just being you with nature and wildlife around you, it's something that is built for that. And we are looking forward to welcoming back travelers pretty soon, and especially in 2021, when I know a lot of things will change in that situation. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, in terms of our tourism product, for anyone that has ever been here or that has done a bit of research on Guyana, and even so from a local perspective, Guyana is such a vast place, not only in terms of culture, but in terms of experiences and what you can enjoy. When you come to Guyana, everything is an authentic adventure. But we know that to best describe it, we found 5 main areas that we can best describe it to someone that's now learning about it. Guyana offers you authentic nature and wildlife experiences, active adventure and exploration experiences, culture and heritage, birding experiences, as well as conservation and SAFE, which is scientific, academic, volunteer, and educational. And it's something that's very ingrained in terms of what we are as a destination, conservation and sustainability. But one of the most spectacular things about any trip to Guyana is that while there are many elements to what you can experience, you can have one activity or your one day in Guyana can be packed with so many things that you do touch a little bit upon all of that. You can be in the rainforest looking for a giant anteater and see a bird that's maybe on your birding list for quite some time, while having that conversation with a local tour guide to learn more about his culture, his experiences, how he grew up, and what makes Guyana special to him. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. I think that is the end of my presentation. I know all the other speakers will go a little bit more in depth into some of the things that makes Guyana quite special as a destination. So with this, I'd like to introduce Helen Byron of Wildlife Worldwide. Helen, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So yeah, as you can see, I work for Wildlife Worldwide. So I'm going to be talking to you very much from a wildlife perspective. Can I have the next slide, please? But on a very personal note, I particularly am drawn to remote environments, big skies, where there are very few of us humans and where wildlife very much takes center stage. And I have to say that Guyana well and truly delivered on that score. So it had been on my radar for a long time, thanks to the work of Diane McTurk that I'll talk to you about with her giant river otters. A mythical land of just vast rainforests and giants, jaguars, caiman, giant anteater, and this was very much the top of my wish list in terms of the mammals that I was hoping to see. And again, I just wasn't disappointed, but you don't have to go into the interior to start with your wildlife fix. With a lot of countries, the city into which you fly, your gateway city, is exactly that. It's a logistical point. We had a day in Georgetown. We started with a tour of the botanical gardens on our very first morning. And I have to say, we clocked up in excess of 50 birds just in one morning, in about 2 hours of walking through the gardens. You've got joggers running around you, you've got the city waking up around you, and we were being treated to giant owls and to tanagers and to macaws and to blood-coloured woodpeckers and orioles, and the list just went on and on and on. And then we went out with Tony a little bit later that day, and with Salvador and his lovely wife, and we were introduced to manatees, which was just something that I was not expecting. And I think really that sort of sums up my experiences of Guyana, is just expect the unexpected. Not only is it remote and pristine, but it will just surprise you at every turn. Next slide, please. So whether it's the giant anteater, which of course is a savanna dweller, I was expecting the entire country to be covered in rainforest. But I mean, you know, those giant anteaters, they're capable of hoovering up 30,000 termites and ants on a daily basis, using their incredible sense of smell, their wonderful claws. They've got no teeth, they literally just hoover them up, and they're a savanna dweller. So I wasn't really expecting to be in an environment that looked like East Africa, right next to the river, where giant river otters and caiman were lurking, whether it's black caiman, whether it's spectacled caiman. I was absolutely amazed, and I loved the fact that so much exploration in Guyana is done on the water. So we were lucky enough to get involved in a black caiman capture. So you're not just restricted to heading out onto the riverways during the day. You also go at night, which is when the caiman will be likely more active. It gives you a chance to clock up an incredible number of species of bat sightings, from fish-eating bats to possibly my favourite bird that we saw. Sorry to the harpies and the cock of the rock fans out there, but a boat-billed heron. It's like an African shoebill, but slightly smaller. Again, I just wasn't expecting that, and we saw that on our first night, and I was so excited. It was ridiculous. But so yes, whether you're sitting in a dugout canoe enjoying a sundowner next to Victoria Amazonica and just the most beautiful water lilies and the noises at the end of the day as you know, the diurnal animals start to switch off a little bit and the chirruping as the nocturnals start to come out. The exploration by river I found an absolute novelty, and I loved it because you just don't know what's coming around the corner. Could it be a jaguar, you know, looking for caiman? Could it be jabiru storks nesting right up above you, and you're just staring there in awe at the size of their nests? It's quite superb. Primates swinging through the trees. Arapaimas, the world's largest, you know, sort of freshwater scaled fish. Again, it's just an assault to the senses. You're always on the lookout for what's next, and then a skimmer will go past you, or a macaw, it's just truly wonderful. Next slide, please. And of course, this really was what put Guyana on the map for me. It was the work of Diane McTurk. Growing up in Africa when I was little, and I was just absolutely in awe of Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall and all the greats that had, you know, gone before with working and putting particular creatures on the map. And Diane McTurk for me was one of those. So to be able to visit Karanambu, where she lived and where she worked and did all of her conservation work with these giant river otters, watching them hunt, you know, whether they're just going for fish, for eels, for anaconda, even caiman at times. Again, it's just that was a very, very special part of the trip from my perspective. And being able to watch these animals up close, you know, they're incredibly vocal and incredibly athletic. And it's just an absolute privilege to be able to spend time with them. Next slide, please. And then really, for me, although wildlife is very much my thing, this Kaitoa Falls just proved to be the absolute jewel in the crown where Guyana was concerned. I don't think I've ever been so awestruck by a waterfall in my entire life. And I feel like I'm quite guilty now because I love Victoria Falls, I love Iguazu Falls, but Kaitoa is quite simply in a league of its own. You've got cock of the rocks that are found in this area. You've got golden frogs in the bromeliads, giving you great photographic opportunities. You've got bladderworts, so insects are kept to a minimum because all of the vegetation is effectively eating them with the insectivorous plants. But just the sheer scale of these falls and watching the white-collared swifts swoop in and out underneath the falls, it's so remote and it's so breathtaking. You actually have to sit down to lower your sense of gravity, because if you look out over those falls, it's gobsmacking the extent at which they fall. And you know, there's no railings, there's no hotels, there's just park rangers. It's in a completely pristine habitat. It's completely untouched, which really just sums Guyana up to me. And next slide, please. But I'm very aware that for many people, particularly our clients who are very interested from a birding and from a wildlife point of view, there are certain key species on their wish list. So jaguars probably being the king where the mammals are concerned, plus also your giant anteater. And if you're into your birds, this is going to be what you want to see. The cock of the rock, it's the from the Ghanaian shield rather than the Andean cock of the rock, and also the harpy eagle. Now, we had a simply astounding harpy eagle sighting. We were just going along the main highway that cuts down from north to south through Guyana, and one of the guys sitting in the back just went, "Stop a second," and we just reversed back up, and there was this incredible creature, this harpy on a dead tree right above the tree canopy, giving us the most wonderful view. And we watched this just fly from tree to tree to tree. And harpies will nest. You know, their young will fledge up usually around about 6 months, but will stay in the vicinity of the parents for up to a year. So if you know of a harpy eagle nest, you're increasing your chances of actually being able to see the eagle as well. But the colours, the shapes, the sizes, from toucans to macaws to parrots to crimson topaz, the amount of hummingbirds is just amazing. Even if you don't think you're into birds, trust me, after 10 days or 2 weeks in Guyana, you will be loving birds. So it's just, yeah, I absolutely loved it. There are so many highlights, the sound of the bellbird, the sound of the capuchin, and then actually being able to see a capuchin bird. Essentially everything about Guyana, I just thought from a wildlife perspective, from a nature perspective, from a getting away from the crowds perspective, I thought it was phenomenal. And there's probably loads that I've forgotten to say, probably loads more that I could say. Well, I know I could. But next slide, please, because what I'm going to do is hand you over to Tony Thorne, who is the MD of Wilderness Explorers. I had the great pleasure of traveling with him in Guyana, and it's just wonderful. Over to you, Tony.
Right, thank you, Helen. That was wonderful. And I'm going to chat to everyone now about community-led and owned tourism. So many destinations offer great wildlife and adventure opportunities, but the strong community-led and owned tourism component is what sets Guyana apart and is truly Guyana's key strength and point of difference. Guyana's community tourism started in the Makushi village of Surama in the late 90s. Significantly, community tourism has been through organic development rather than being government-led. Surama started with a simple 4-bedroom guest house, and through the profits they then relocated the lodge to a new site and built an 8-room lodge. For Indigenous communities in remote areas, there's little cash employment available. Traditional farming and hunting is often supplemented by villagers leaving for long periods of time to work in Brazil, in the goldfields, or in forestry, all of which negatively impact on the social fabric of village life. Tourism offers job opportunities right in the village and incorporates many of the skills of the people in providing unique cultural, wildlife and adventure experiences. So at Wilderness Explorers, we first started working with Surama back in 1999, and we supplemented their own skill set with our strengths in marketing, packaging and sales. So Surama quickly developed their lodge and tours and the skills of those employed by the lodge. The village council acts as the board of directors, and the tourism committee oversees the operations of the lodge and tourism. The lodge employs villagers on a job share system where staff work for 1 month and then have 1 month off. This doubles the number that can be employed and allows a balanced mix of cash employment and time to continue traditional farming and hunting, and importantly, the work is right there in the village. Not only does tourism pay employees wages, the profits go to the village council for uses that benefit the entire community. Profits have bought a village bus, a truck, and tourism partially funded the construction of a village airstrip, and 2 young women were sent to Cuba to train as doctors. The community tourism also provides environmental protection. Surama has set aside part of their land as a no hunting zone used for wildlife tourism. Community members who previously were bird trappers became bird guides. The community today protects 2 harpy eagle nesting sites, as Helen just mentioned, and this is encouraged through the tourism revenue. Surama was the first community to embrace tourism, and the numerous villages have since followed their lead. And one of those communities is the remote village of Rewa. And they're an example, and they've learned valuable lessons along the way about tourism. as they develop their own award-winning lodge and their tourism experience. Rio has been fortunate to have international assistance in developing a sports fishing product. They now offer exceptional catch and release fly fishing for arapaima, the largest scale freshwater fish in the world. The community stopped hunting the fish due to decreasing population, and eventually Guyana banned the fishing of this endangered species. This example of grassroots conservation means protection of the species ensured in this area through sustainable fishing practices that bring economic benefits to the community, whilst at the same time protecting the fish. In the community of Urupakari is Cayman House, a small 7-room lodge which offers visitors a unique experience of joining villagers as they conduct research into the black cayman population. As a tourist, you can have a hands-on opportunity and be involved in gathering the data that is incorporated into the species research. Once the project was externally funded, but now it's entirely funded through tourism. The lodge also supports a conservation project protecting the yellow-spotted Amazon river turtles, and a community school and library and an entrepreneurial group called Wabani, who create amazing local furniture. Not all communities have a lodge though, but they benefit in other ways from tourism. Aranaputa developed a cottage industry producing peanut butter primarily for a government-funded feeding program. This earns further income by them accepting tourists to experience the process at their little cottage factory. A slight variation is a unique business model of community and tourism services, which manages and operates the Irakrama Canopy Walkway and the Atta Rainforest Lodge. This company is jointly owned by an NGO in Irakrama International Centre, 2 private sector companies in Rockview Lodge and Wilderness Explorers, and the indigenous community of Sarama. Community-led and owned tourism means your tourism dollars stay in the community. Sarama estimates 60% of the village economy is based on tourism. Villagers employed at the lodge, farmers selling vegetables to the lodge, boat builders building boats, and then everyone spending money within their community. There are less obvious benefits that are not financial. Visitors' interest in the indigenous culture has promoted a resurgence and pride in their cultural heritage, which has led to the development of cultural groups that perform not just for tourists, but also in competitions within Guyana and abroad. School children are again learning their indigenous language, and many communities now have junior wildlife clubs where young people learn about their environment and conservation and are the breeding ground for future generations of guides. Visitors are also able to learn about and engage in the indigenous way of life. Villagers are able to showcase their daily lives, including the importance of cassava in their culture and its numerous uses. As a visitor, you can try your hand at creating your own handicraft guided by experts, or spinning and weaving local cotton. But one of my favorite experiences is just hearing the stories from community members, and being able to chat and exchange ideas and views and learn from their perspective of the world. If you'd like to see how you can visit a community-led and owned lodge, you can check out our website at Wilderness Explorers for ideas, and we're very happy to create wonderful experiences with the Indigenous people of Guyana. So I'd like to now hand over to Salvador de Keres, who works at Wilderness Explorers. He's one of the most highly rated guides in Guyana and often referred to as the Guyana Wikipedia for his wonderful knowledge of the history and culture of Guyana. Over to you, Salvador.
There's my picture. Hello. I don't see my picture.
We can see you. It's all right, Salvador.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. But for those of you across the pond, good evening. Can I see the first slide, please? This is a little bit like speed dating, which I, of course, have never done, but it's just kind of, I'm going to try to do it. What you're looking at is the Guyana Shield, which separated from Africa and from Gondwana millions and millions and hundreds of millions of years ago. But it's what gives Guyana and the other Guyana countries a very unique and a very high species count, especially for local endemics. On one side, we have the Orinoco River, and on the other side, we have, on the southeast corner, we have the Amazon River, and we have also the Essequibo River, which is in the middle of it, And those are the three largest rivers in South America. So Guyana is really called the land of many waters for a reason. Next slide, please. So the first European to arrived on Columbus on his third voyage, sailed along the coast. But he decided that the Guyana swamp, as we called it, or the wild coast, as John Gimlet called it, was really not worth a visit because it was too swampy and too muddy, etc., etc. But along the Spanish and Portuguese went elsewhere. So when the British, French, and Dutch arrived, there was nothing left except this muddy, swampy area on northern South America. The Dutch discovered that the land was very, very fertile because it's alluvial mud. And of course, being 6 feet below sea level for them was not a problem. So they jumped right in. On the top left-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner, that is the fort, the Dutch fort on Fort Island in the Essequibo River, which was the first seat of European government, so to speak, in the Americas, in Guyana. The picture in between the two is the seawall that was built by the British to Dutch specifications to keep the seawater out. We became permanently British after being French, Dutch, English at various times. One year we were all three. We finally became permanently British, Demerara and Essequibo in 1803. In 1812, Berbice was added and we officially became British Guyana, and Georgetown became officially Georgetown and not Stabroek, Longchamp or Kingston, which was the French, Dutch and English names. The coca that you see there is a sluice. Because we're 6 feet below sea level, you have to employ somebody to let the water out and to keep the water out. So 4 times a day, twice to open, twice to close, you have to employ somebody to do this. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these cocas or sluices all along the coast. So after 1812, we became British, and Queen Victoria, who's in the middle there. Now there's a long story that she doesn't have her hand and she doesn't have a nose, but you'll have to come to Guyana for me to tell you that story. Next slide, please. So Guyana finally became, after indigo and cotton. Oh, this is not the, anyway. Georgetown, switch gears here. Georgetown has a very unique architecture. Most of the buildings are wood, and because of course we're below sea level, you have to build up off the ground because we can get flooded. You get heavy rains for 2 days, we're underwater because they can't let the water out quick enough because it's high tide or something. In the far left-hand corner, that is Carroll Lodge. That all made out of wood. The building below is the Walter Roth Indigenous Museum. That's also all made out of wood. The gallery in front, of course, is where you had your gin and tonic in the afternoon to see who was passing. On the bottom right-hand corner is the St. George's Cathedral. That is the Archbishop of the West Indies. At the time, British Guyana was the most important colony in the West Indies, in particular in the Americas after America was gone, for the British. And so the seat of the Archbishop of the West Indies was based here. So to make Georgetown a city, of course, you have to have a cathedral. So they built the cathedral. They employed Sir Arthur Bloomfield in England, who refused to come to Guyana, and told them they have to build it in stone. A cathedral has to be built in stone. We said no, it will sink into the mud because there is no bedrock to anchor it on. And so we ended up with the largest wooden church in the world. Every Guyanese will argue with you that it is the largest wooden building in the world. I am not at liberty to say which one it is, but it's the largest. The Stabroek Market in the middle at the top was originally, it's a complete iron building. It was built in parts in the United States and shipped down here to be a train station. But when they got here, they realized that we only had one train and it had 5 stations, so it became a market. And then below that is the coffee statue, which celebrates a slave uprising in the Dutch part on when the Dutch were still in control of Berbice. And then below that, the Humaniana, which was built by the Wai tribe in the far south of Guyana. Next slide, please. I hope this is the sugar one. Yes, good. So after indigo and cotton and everything, we became sugar. Guyana was Demerara sugar, of course, is what everybody in England knew sugar as originally. It's all below sea level. Those are cane fields in the background. The bullocks pull the punts, those metal punts that are sitting there in the canal. These covered ones are to transport the cane cutters into the fields. Then one of the lower pictures, you can see some punts that are loaded with the canes coming into the factory. Many people in England, we had over 300 estates in Guyana, including estates that were owned by very famous British. Gladstone's father had 4 estates here in Guyana also. No, 5, sorry. But of course, besides sugar, one of the main byproducts is molasses, and one of the main byproducts of molasses is rum. And Guyana happens to have the best in the world. We keep winning all the awards, so it's a fact. I'm not arguing this. Of course, the British Navy depended on Guyana rum for the rum tot that was given out to the sailors every day. When they discontinued it in the early 70s, of course, the Britannia somehow just didn't rule the waves anymore, did it? Slide, please. Here we go. I think where are we? Okay, growing up in Guyana, what was always so wonderful for me was the mix of cultures. We have 16 public holidays every year, 16. And just to give you an idea of the diversity of it, a few years back, Thursday was Yom Nabi, which was a Muslim holiday. Friday was Good Friday, which is Christian. Saturday was Pagwa, which is a Hindu holiday. Sunday was Easter Sunday, which again is Christian. Monday was Easter Monday, but because we were British, of course, Easter Monday is a holiday. So of course, nobody went to work for the whole week. But it just gives you an idea. Growing up, everybody celebrated everything. At Christmas, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, we all do Christmas. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, we all do Pagwa. We all do everybody else's ceremonies. The Amerindians are First Peoples, as I like to say it. They have a whole month, the whole month of September. And so September is always a good time to come to Guyana, because anytime you go in the interior, every village has celebrations that they're doing. On the far left-hand corner, those are kites. And at Easter, especially on Easter Monday, we fly kites. Thousands and thousands and thousands of kites litter the sky everywhere. And I think I'm going to hand off to Kamrul Bash, who's going to keep us going. Kamrul, over to you.
Kamrul, are you there? Kamrul? If not, maybe Nicole will. Oh, here we are.
Hi, could you hear me?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Kamrul.
Great. Just wanted to say greetings to everybody. I'll be shutting off my video because the internet on this side here is a bit poor, but here's the face to the name, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right, so a little about me. I've been working at the Guyana Tourism Authority for 6 years now, and I'm heavily involved in product development, both within indigenous communities and non-indigenous communities. So I'll take you through much of the products that we've been working on in the last 2 years or so for indigenous communities, and then focus on some of the non-indigenous products that we have in the pipeline. Next slide, please. Right, so what we have here is a map of Guyana that outlines the products there, as you would see. Basically, most of them are within circuits. And what I'll do now is to dive into Maracaibo. Next slide, please. Great, so Maracaibo is one of the 4 pilot indigenous communities that the GTA has been supporting since 2018. It is one that is very accessible to the coast and offers a diverse range of experiences. Travelers who would have the opportunity to traverse in a traditional dugout canoe, as you're seeing in the middle photo there, which the Arawak still use in the village for transport. A trip to Maracaibo, of course, must include the remarkable display of traditional cultures and practices. You'll get to see the Takuma worm, where it originates from, and learn about the extraction from the Ite tree trunk. I think you see Gary on the right-hand side there, demonstrating to one of the visitors the Takuma worm. And the best part is that you can really consume it raw, or if you're faint-hearted, you can have it roasted. I personally prefer it to have it raw. The cassava, as a staple in the Arawak household, is processed for the visitor, to see the unique methods employed in extracting the cyanide from the bitter cassava, and then preparing cassava bread for lunch with tumapot. Craft making using mukru and other local raw materials are also showcased. During the trip, you will have the chance to soak in the scenic sites and unwind and learn much about the history of the village. Next slide, please. Next. Right, so Karasabay, as you can see there, it's located in a valley, so very picturesque scenes. It is completely surrounded by mountains, and it's home to the sun parakeet. It is part, of course, of the expanding North Rupununi circuit. Apart from the sun parakeet, Karasabay experiences are adventure-based. Hiking of Saddleback Mountain. There you can see myself and the immediate past director and other members of Karasabay at the top of the mountain there, looking at the beautiful vistas. And travelers would have the option of trekking by farms to reach this spectacular waterfall that you see there, called Weye Waterfalls. And it's very interactive. Visitors can unwind and swim and have some relaxing time within nature's beauty. And in the afternoon, you have the choice of choosing a sunset tour on the Ireng River that lends to mesmerizing views of the rock formation. And if you get lucky, you can spot the sun parakeet returning home to rest. Karasabay is definitely one of the places that you must visit once you're in the Rupununi. Next slide, please. Great, so we have here Warapoka, Wakapau, Lake Kapui, Chinapau, and St. Cuthbert. So let me start off with Warapoka. The warmth of the nations there, the Waraos from Warapoka, would instantly set the travelers at ease after a lengthy trip to get there. Warapoka is found in Region 1 and has these massive rock formations, as you can see there, and it seems like it was placed there by some divine being. Just seemed like it popped out of nowhere. It's home to 2 harpy eagle sites. I heard Helen talking about this. So you could see the harpy eagle on the mainland, or you could head down to Lurie Creek to have another view of it. Travelers will also be able to explore an ancient cave, which has a footprint of a human. And it is believed that some mythical being left his footprint on the rock while trying to escape from his enemy. So a lot of good storytelling around in Warapoka. Also, you'll be able to visit the Shell Mound, and travelers would have the opportunity to sample some aspect of the authentic Warao culture. As Tony mentioned, you can interact with some elder persons like Aunt Irene, and she would regale you with some stories and also show you some craft demonstration and show cassava bread making. Candle wax making from wax from a special tree is also on display for the traveler. In Wakapa, which forms part of the expanding Essequibo circuit, it is one of the new kids on the block. The village is one of the best examples of an indigenous community that is committed to maintaining its traditions. Apart from the cassava making demonstrations, Wakapa is known for coffee production, and storytelling are some of its highlights. Traveling to Wakapa was very exciting, as you would get to enjoy the exciting speedboat ride that meanders through the forest canopy. Upon arrival, visitors are left to the awe of the silk cotton tree, which is one of Wakapa's landmarks. There's also a story about a mythical whale that attacked the village, and the supposed fossilized bones can be found deep in a farm. Down to Kapui. Kapui is located on the Essequibo coast, and it is home to one of the 5 Great Lakes. This indigenous village is located near Anna Regina in Region 2. It's very scenic and tranquil. The community offers nature and adventure activities, and it's perfect for a weekend getaway. A village tour can be organized via a river to showcase the famous landmarks. The village also has set up a camp that is equipped with hammocks and can host a bush cookout. There are hiking trails at the back of the village with interest in birds, wildlife, and medicinal plants. Of course, you have access to the lake, and you can be able to relax and explore the possibility of purchasing craft before departure. Other activities are currently being explored to add to an itinerary or the further development of other itineraries. Chinapao is located close to the Kaitro National Park. It's actually the closest village to the national park. And this remote village has high quality hiking opportunities. The most rewarding, of course, is a trek to Kaitro Falls. Other activities include the tarantula spotting. It's possible to see the blue, black, and brown tarantulas during day or night. You could also visit a fishing and hunting camp en route to and from Kaitro. St. Cuthbert's Mission, which is one of the most accessible villages to the city, is no stranger to tourism. The village has now formally committed to advancing its efforts. Currently, there is a creek that can be used as an access point for birding tours. The national bird, the Hoatzin, can be found in the Mahika Creek, and other birds and wildlife can be spotted. Farm tours are currently under development for the promotion of local and unique fruits. St. Cuthbert's is also known for its famous talented artisans, sculptors, and painters. And these high-quality pieces will be on display for travelers. Salvador touched a little bit about the rum route. If you can change the slide now, please. Salvador touched a bit on the rum route. We launched it back in February, and the rum route, of course, seeks to promote Guyana's rich agricultural traditions, a local cultural heritage, and rum producing prowess. It's a sensory experience of the role of rum and sugarcane in Guyana's economy and its impact on the landscape and people. Iflat, which is located on the west coast, in Region 3, has hosted a few tours so far to the estate and the sugar plantation. Experiences at the estate has an awesome pond tour, which was visible from the Salvador slide. And obviously, this is unique to sugarcane harvesting in Guyana. The factory tour gives travelers the insights in sugar production and what it is like in a day of a life of a harvester. There's also the experience at Demerara Distillers Limited, the producer of the award-winning El Dorado rums, which will take tours to certain areas within the factory and highlight the production process and give the traveler a sample of various types of Guyana's world-famous rums. And lastly, the Seven Curry tour, if you can change the slide, please. The Seven Curry tour is a novel food tour that offers experiential and well-designed culinary experiences. The new Guyana Georgetown Seven Curry tour is an immersive culinary experience for both visitors as well as local residents that exposes guests to the entire process of preparing Seven Curry. From purchasing key ingredients such as the eggplant and edos and katahar at the local market to learning the steps of preparing the dish. The meal is obviously served in They've freshly gathered water lily leaves there, as you can see, me retrieving some of them. And it features the 7 different curries eaten with rice, such as, and other accompaniments like puri and achar. The fun part is that you get to eat it with your hands. All right, that is part of the experience. And the tour includes a 7 curry factory tour along with a visit to the puri vendor. The entire 7 curry tour experience will be hosted by a singing chef, quite unique. And as the name suggests, he serenades his guests with Guyanese folkloric songs as they cook and eat with him. So that's a little synopsis of the products that are under development. I think now I'll hand it back to Salvador. Salvador, over to you.
I know they cut me short, so I didn't get to talk very much about the food because, again, because of the mixtures of cultures, even though I have a Portuguese background, we had curry at least once a week, at least, sometimes twice. But the mix of food and cuisine in Guyana is very unique and very different. We have the strong Amerindian or indigenous First Peoples base. Added to that are the African influences, the East Indian influences, even Portuguese, Chinese, everybody all mixed up. And everybody, the food is one area where everything mixed. And our good friend Delvin Adams came back from the States and returned to Guyana, and it has been a wonderful thing for Guyana. And so he does a market tour, takes you in the market, and you go to the backyard cafe. He set up his little restaurant by appointment only. And here's a video that gives you a good idea of what Delvin does. He just actually had Gordon Ramsay with him. A lot of you have probably seen that program. Anyway, here we go, the video.
You get in the market, you get to meet the farmers, you get to meet the local vendors who buys from the farmers and then sell to restaurants and people who cook in their home. You're getting to meet the grassroots of the people and getting to understand and know where your food comes from. Our people, you speak to them openly and they open up to you. So you get a sense of understanding where they come from, where your food is coming from. Our people, we are very strong in the coming back stage, rebuilding. We're always rebuilding ourselves, and I love the way our people stand together with everything. So that's what I love about my country, my people. We're very, very supportive, and we can come back and come through anything. I'm Delvin Adams from the Backyard Cafe, and I love Guyana.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, a couple of people again. I know certainly for me that video was a bit pixelated, and I think it probably was for a few other people. So frustrated. We played it about 3 hours ago where it ran perfectly. But as mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out tomorrow links to an article about with some things you need to know about Guyana. But also we'll be sending out a recording of tonight, and it will have the videos in. And I think if you play them outside of this kind of time, I think you'll find that they run perfectly. So do play them again tomorrow when we send them through, because that's a great video. And again, I thoroughly recommend doing a market tour with Delvin, who you just saw, and eating at his little cafe, which is by appointment only. You can't just rock up. But it is such a brilliant experience when you're in Guyana, so do make sure you allow for that. Okay, so appreciate we're running slightly over, but the majority of you have managed to stay with us, which is brilliant. So we are now going to go over to some questions. So for that, to moderate that, I'm going to hand over to Guyana's representative in the UK, who is Kate McWilliams. So welcome, Kate.
Hi, good evening, Lynn. Good evening to the panelists, and good evening or good morning, good afternoon to all of our audience. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've had a huge amount of questions during the presentations, so thanks for the inspiring content and the varied content. I've tried to scribble down as many questions as possible, and I've tried to answer along the way, and thank you also to many of the panelists, Tony and Nicola and many others, for trying to respond to those questions as we go. But we'll try, we're worried that we've got limited time, but we will try and cover off as many of those as possible. And if we don't get to your question now, we are, as Lynn mentioned, we are doing a follow-up tomorrow, so we will try and focus on the questions that have been asked a lot by many panelists, either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll try and address a lot of those tomorrow. So also I wanted to mention quickly, it's so great to see so many Guyanese, both located here in the UK and in Guyana, joining us this evening, and some names that have popped up. I think we've met at various travel fairs and shows in the last couple of years. So thanks again for joining and supporting us this evening. So firstly, it's great to end on a note from Delvin. I'm sure we're very hungry and we're probably all almost ready for dinner or lunch, wherever we may be. I would like to ask, and a question that's come in, about the food throughout Guyana. So if you're going on a tour to Guyana, how does this vary in Georgetown and in the interior? And what can visitors expect? And the other question is, what's the quality of the food like? And if people do have a specific diet or something, is that catered for in Guyana? Salvador, I'm sure you can answer that for us.
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say, to give you an idea of the quality of the food in Guyana, everybody that comes to Guyana puts on weight. That is a given. If you're thinking you're coming on vacation to lose weight, don't come to Guyana, forget it. The food is very varied and you get everything all the time. Of course, in the interior, you tend to get more of the what we call the pepper pot, more the Amerindian-based foods, but you also get everything all the time. The African-based foods, they use a lot of coconut milk, cook a lot of things with coconut milk. Of course, the Indian curries and everything, but everybody eats everything. There's not one area that you would go to that only find one kind of food. It really is very mixed, and the quality and quantity is very good. It's very hard to lose weight, I'm telling you.
Can I just add? Sorry, can I just add something to that? Because you said about special diets and things as well. I'm a pescatarian, I'm vegetarian who sometimes eats fish, particularly if I think it's sustainable, etc. I had no trouble at all eating there. The quality of the food and indeed the quantity of the food was amazing. And so I think it's true to say that various diets can be catered for. And what blew me away, in fact, was the freshness of the produce as well. Because of course, Salvador, it's all local produce, isn't it? And it's really good quality. Yeah.
It is. The only thing to remember that some of the remote locations, you can't just show up and say, well, I'm gluten-free, because then they're going to be scrambled. You just have to give them a heads up before you get there so that they can prepare and make sure that they have what it is that you need. But really, it's easy. Having different dietary, it's really easy. It's not hard.
That's great. Thank you very much, Salvador and Lynn. We're going to rapidly try and get through the topics because we've got so many questions. We've got quite a few questions on animals and birds and wildlife, as I'm sure you can imagine. So let's move rapidly on to another theme. We've had quite a few questions about the jaguar, as you can imagine. So we have a question saying, what are the chances of seeing a jaguar? Helen, can you perhaps respond to that?
There's a very healthy population of jaguars in Guyana. the infrastructure is a little more limited in Guyana, which is a benefit to the jaguar because it means they can hide. You've got as good a chance, you know, of seeing them. We're never going to guarantee anything. We wouldn't do that with any country in the world. It would be foolish. I went in with the expectation that if I saw one, it would be the icing with the cherry on top. But even just the anticipation of knowing that they're there, we saw claw markings, we smelt their urine, we knew they were close, they'd probably seen us. In my instance, I didn't see them there, but it didn't detract from this, you know, from the experience whatsoever. So they're there. If you see them, you're lucky, but you could say that about any wildlife experience, really.
Thank you, Helen. And what about, let's talk a bit more about the harpy and the cock of the rock. So obviously two bird species that many people hope to see when they go to Guyana. Could you maybe tell us what's the likelihood of seeing a harpy or a cock of the rock?
We were lucky on both counts. You know, I mentioned very briefly the highway that cuts down through from Georgetown in a north to south direction, and an awful lot of the rainforest lodges, whether it's Atta, whether it's Surama, whether it's Irakrama, they're all in a rainforested zone where you've got every chance of seeing birds as well as jaguar. There are lots of trails. So with the harpy in particular, as I mentioned, because they nest in one area for quite a while, as soon as nest locations are found, trails will go to those nests to keep an eye on them. We had a monster of a sighting. It was simply phenomenal, and it just flew from, you know, from tree to tree to tree. We probably followed it on foot and in the vehicles for an excess of half an hour. The cock of the rock, it was maybe a 20-minute walk through rainforest following a trail to find the cock of the rock. You'd think, being bright orange, that you couldn't miss them. They're actually really quite hard to find. And if you're a photographer, trying to get them in focus amongst all the canopy and so on, is a challenge. But sometimes you've just got to put the camera down and just go, crikey, it's right in front of me, it's there. And the fact that they're at Kaitour, everyone's going to go to Kaitour, so just keep your eyes open. You never know what's around the corner. That's the joy of it.
Thank you, Helen. And that allows us to move onto another topic, which is of course Kaitour, and we've had a lot of questions about that. A lot of people have asked a little bit more detail in terms of how do you get to Kaitour, what happens in the day, how long do you get at the falls, what's the wildlife watching opportunities when you get to the falls. So maybe Tony, perhaps you could answer that one for us.
Yeah, sure. So most visitors to Guyana take a day trip to Kaitour. It's a 1-hour flight from Georgetown out to the falls, and you would generally spend 2 hours on the ground, and that gets you to 3 or 4 vantage points. And also, if you're quite quick about moving around, you have the opportunity to see the Guyanan cock of the rock, which Helen mentioned, and the little golden frog, which live in the bromeliads. What's important is making sure you have a good guide who can show you where these things are, because they're not easy to find by yourself, so that's really key. The cock of the rock, they congregate in what's called lek, so it's where they display for mating, and they're always around that area. Once you know where a lek is, nothing's guaranteed, but it's pretty unusual not to see a cock of the rock. And when Lynn was there with us last year, we were there during the mating season, and we had, I don't know, 5 or 6 males around us. You know, it was quite amazing. The other option to go to Kaitour is doing an overland trek, 3, 4, 5 days, depending on how you do it. So that's a bit more adventurous. You're camping out, but amazing to walk up the gorge and then see the falls. And the other option, if you even take a tourist flight, you've got to rough it for the night in a very simple guest house, but overnighting can't be beaten. When you all the few tourists that leave for the day, you have the waterfall to yourself. All the swifts are congregating that roost behind the waterfall. So I'd recommend to anyone, tough it up for a night and spend an overnight at Kaitour Falls. You won't regret it.
Tony, for many of our viewers, they'd be thinking, oh my goodness, do I need to be super fit to do this? Do I need to be 20 years old? Do I need to run every day? How realistic is for a lot of our viewers to do the overland trek?
many years ago, it took a lady who was probably in her mid-50s who'd never camped in her life, and she was being a documentary done it, and she did it. Look, you can trek a lot of it, but equally you can go by boat. There is the last section up to the top. There's a bit called Oh My God, and it's called that for a reason because it is pretty tough. For many people, perhaps they can't carry their backpack, and they will therefore have a porter who will carry it for them, and then it makes it not so difficult. But you don't have to be super fit. There's plenty of people who have good fitness who in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s that could easily do it.
And I see Salvador nodding along. Salvador, is this something you've done, or is there anything you'd like to add? You're on mute at the moment.
I have done it. I think one of the things, it's don't do it in the rainy season because you can be wading creeks with water up to your neck. So that becomes a little bit difficult and a little bit, I think you have to be younger for that. But it really is not that difficult. And Oh My God Mountain at the end, there's a reason it has that name. It's a little, that last piece going up, but then you forget everything when you see the falls at the top. It just takes it all away. It takes all the pain away.
And Kate, we actually designed a trip which is for people who are perhaps not so fit, where you fly into Mardia, which is the closest township. Then you travel primarily by boat up the gorge, which is amazing. And then you have that one trek up to the top, which, you know, as Salvador says, a bit of pain. It's a short-term pain for a big gain when you get to the top. Nothing beats that rising to the top of the mountain and that waterfall appearing in front of you. It is spectacular. It's 5 times the height of Niagara, and as you know, Helen mentioned before, she's no longer loyal to Victoria. Kaitoa is the one.
It's the one.
That sounds really great. I mean, certainly I've been lucky enough to go to Kaitoa myself, but not do the trek. But certainly on my bucket list to hopefully one day go back and do that trek. So we had a couple of other questions about other falls that you would recommend. A question from Alex, who says, "What other waterfalls would you recommend in Guyana?" I don't know who might want to answer that for us.
Well, I could take a shot at it. I'll first, Tony, and then you can go. The problem with a lot of these waterfalls is that they're very, very remote. You can't drive to them, and they are absolutely spectacular. Some of them you can actually get into the water, which you can't do at Kiteshore. Oranduke, which is a lot of the trips to Kiteshore, does a second leg out to Oranduke, which is on the Brazilian border. It's not as you know, scary as Kiteshore can be, and you can get into the water, you can swim, you can sit under the various waterfalls and have like a jacuzzi. But a lot of the other waterfalls are very, very remote, and it's your transportation that tends to be expensive to get you there.
Okay, thanks Salvador. Quickly going back to the Cock of the Rock, apologies because we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A. So I think there's a lot of interest in the Cock of the Rock. We've been asked if we can clarify the mating season for the Cock of the Rock. That's from Ruth Maxwell.
Yeah, that's generally around February time, February into March is so that's the key time when they're displaying, but you can find them all year round though.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so I think there's a couple of logistic questions as well, which we'll quickly try and cover off. And I know Nicola did cover this in some of her presentation, a couple of others of the speakers as well. So realistically, in terms of the rains, Nicola, could you just confirm again, when is the wet and the dry season, and when really is it recommended for people to go? And I know it will depend on what they want to see and do, but if you could give us just a bit of clarity on that.
Our rainy or our wet season is usually May to about mid-August, and from late August to about April the following year, that is the dry season. So in terms of the types of product, it's easier to transport and move around Guyana when it's the dry season, especially when you go more to those indigenous communities, especially in the North of Pununi area. I know a question did come through earlier too, that you're going to see those waterfalls at the highest when it's the rainy season. But no matter what time of year you go to Kiteshore, it's going to be spectacular throughout. A lot of our scientific tours and a lot of conservation tours happen during that rainy season also, because that's when the biodiversity is at its best and brightest, and it coincides with a lot of university tours as well. So depending really on the type of tour you would like and the type of experiences, one thing to know that every itinerary in Guyana is also customizable. From your diet to what you would like to see to the chances of things that you'd like to experience, it's there. Guyana is just here to welcome you to it, so we just need to know what precautions we need to take on your side as well.
Great, thanks, Nicola. And we've got a couple of questions here from people that are actually specifically asking about the temperature during the rainy season and how the temperature is impacted. And if you can give us an average kind of year-round temperature in the wet and the dry season.
So no matter what type of season, I guess the best thing that we like to term it as, it feels like summer all year round. It's about 27 or maybe 27 degrees Celsius, or maybe 80 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year. When it's rainy, it does get a bit cooler, but not by a lot. One of the most spectacular things about the rainy season here too is that it will be raining for a couple of hours, then you see this 1 hour of pure sunshine and heat, and then the rain comes down again. It's just how the weather system works here in Guyana as well.
Great, thanks, Nicola. And we've got a couple of questions.
Can I add in some?
Sorry,
can I just?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Of course.
Helen, can you please explain? You said it 2 or 3 times. The highway that goes through Guyana. Could you please define highway?
Well,
our idea of highway is very different.
Okay, so I'm the very proud owner of a Guyanese driving license, and it's still in my wallet to this day. So on my trip there, we were given the opportunity of doing some 4x4 driving. And I jumped at the chance. So the highway is essentially, there's no tarmac involved. It's essentially a road that's been cut through the rainforest. So just imagine that beautiful deep red earth, you know, surrounded on either side by a tall canopy of green, green, green. We were stopping repeatedly. There are potholes and they fill with rain, and then you just get swarms of beautiful pale green butterflies. That's one of my favorite memories actually of the Guyana trip, is just being absolutely awed by these the butterflies in the middle of the highway. If we went past maybe 3 or 4 vehicles in the 9 days that we were driving, that was a bit that, you know, that's the highway. It's a track, and the bridges are wooden and they're fantastic, and it's easy driving actually, but it's very enjoyable.
Thanks,
yes,
Helen.
it's not M25.
we've actually had quite a few questions about logistics, as you can imagine, and quite a lot of people have asked, how do you get around Guyana? And if you're an independent traveller, how easy is it travelling in Guyana? Which of the panellists might like to answer that one for us?
I'm happy to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so for independent travellers, it's not as easy as other South American countries. The infrastructure, as Helen just described, is very simple. So we have one north-south road that runs down to Brazil, and it's a track through the forest. We have a road that runs along the coast from Suriname, and it ends at Charity. After that, we have no road. We have no road connection directly to Venezuela. So buses and public transport for backpackers is incredibly limited. And even that road that runs down through the center, many of the lodges are off it, so it's not so easy. Most of our tourists fly into key areas and then travel between lodges by 4-wheel drives and boats, or a combination of the two. So for someone who's traveling independently, it can be challenging. And also remember, our largest aircraft in the country only has 18 seats, so you can't just arrive and hope to get a ticket. Those flights are often fully booked. So it does require a lot more planning than perhaps other destinations where the infrastructure is far more sophisticated.
Great, and although obviously we want to be focusing on Guyana in this presentation, we have been asked in the discussion and in the Q&A, how easy is it to combine Guyana with Suriname? Is it easy enough to do a twin centre? Who would like to answer that one? Salvador, you're nodding.
Yes, one of the hottest things right now. A lot of people seem to be discovering these three funny countries at the top of South America that really have very little to do with, well, they do have something to do with the rest of South America, but one speaks French, one speaks Dutch, and one speaks English. Yes, we have very close ties with Suriname. It's quite easily, the road is surfaced all along the coast. You drive about 3 hours to the border, you get in a ferry, you cross over, and you've got good roads all along the coast, right through to Cayenne. Surfaced, good roads. It takes a while because the ferries, if you're driving, you've got to wait for the ferry to get your vehicle across, and that's timing, etc. All of that logistically, you have to look out. It's not that hard to do. Once you leave the coast going south, then it becomes very difficult because you're on a mud track. There are no gas stations, there are no anything. It's you in the bush. But yes, Suriname, French Guyana, and Guyana is fairly easy to do.
And Kate, I'd add
And
to
you
that
can break it up in the
there's
Caribbean.
multiple flights each day between Georgetown and Paramaribo. So it's there's three different airlines that fly between the capital cities. It doesn't have to be done by road. It's an easy 1 hour flight if you prefer to fly.
Okay, thanks, Tony. We talked, Nicola touched a little bit on sustainable tourism, and Tony also talked a little bit about what we call clot tourism, so community-led and owned tourism in Guyana. And we've had a couple of questions about kind of the current discussion about kind of flight shaming and the kind of carbon argument. So, you know, is there justification for long-haul flights? It's a good question. Obviously, Guyana is quite a long way away from the UK. So as Guyana is looking to develop as a sustainable tourism destination, that's something that is increasingly important to our viewers. So Nicola, would you like to come back to us on that one first?
Sure, thanks, Kate. I know it's a growing concern within this industry, and it's something that us as a destination, with everyone on this call here too, we want to develop Guyana the right way, and we have the extraordinary opportunity right now to develop it with that in mind. I think Kevin Rushby in The Guardian, if anyone would like to read that article in your spare time, did an amazing job in explaining it. But your long haul flight, say for example from the UK to Guyana, will be offset by the type of trips, the type of experiences you have on the ground here. Many of these, most of the emissions that you would probably do when you're in Guyana just takes place between your internal travels, between a Lodge A to Lodge B, but you're not going in, one car is gonna take one person, or one plane will take one person. You do have that community shared vehicle that will help to that as well. And most of the things that you will experience here, many of these communities build these lodges with this in mind, and they all do different conservation projects. Like at Rewa Lodge, you can have the Archival Conservation Project. Sarama talks a lot about their culture. Cayman House New Bakari Del, which Tony alluded to, and Helen talked about as well. They do the Black Cayman Conservation Project and the Turtle Conservation Project. So every experiences you have there, they're giving back to their environments as well.
Thank you, Nicola. And we'll come back to this topic, and I think we do have some questions as well about the kind of exploration of oil in Guyana and how that's going to impact tourism. So we will address that. But first, I just wanted to ask Cameron a question, actually, which is kind of tied into community-led and owned tourism and sustainable tourism. And the question is, some of the projects that you've described, some of the new tourism products, is this the first time that tourism is going to be going to those specific areas? And is this a completely new experience for those communities?
Hey, yes, for most of them that I mentioned, it is quite novel, first time, beginner phase. But some of them have been exposed to it, though more unstructured. So what we've tried to do is to facilitate more structured tourism development within these communities. Obviously, with it being community-led and owned, but very new experiences. So obviously, the time that it takes to develop it will be much longer, because they're now getting familiar with the way tourism works, and I guess the learning curve, I can say, is a bit more steep.
If I can just add to that, Kate, Tony did go a little bit in depth about the story of Surama when he first started. And Surama was the very first indigenous community to look at tourism as the earner for their community. And it saw great benefits. They were able to provide for their families. They were able to educate travelers about what matters to them most of all, and they were able to develop as a community. That model was refined and taken to other communities very close to them. Within the last 2 years of the GTA, we've seen that that is a successful model. It hits all the target markets we want as our destination to grow. It meets what a lot of travelers don't find around the world. And we're actually working with the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs to highlight the communities that are most ready to start embarking on this journey. And I know many people do touch on that sustainable aspect. How are you exposing Guyana in this level to so many people? It's so undiscovered. What if we do get an influx of people into the country? Can our product handle it? But that's why our product development team is working to expand that product, expand that experience so more communities can benefit. And there's not a lot of travelers coming into one specific area, but it's more spread out within the country.
Thank you, Nicola. We had actually...
Can I just add to that? Sorry again.
Of course, Salvador.
Also, I think it's also a very practical thing that is happening. The other communities are seeing the success of Surama and Rewa, and a lot of what it is that the women want to keep their husbands at home. They want to keep them in the village. They don't want the husband to leave to go to work in the gold fields, to go to work in Brazil, to go to work. He doesn't really come back 8 months later with a lot of money, and sometimes he comes back with disease because of what goes on in some of these gold mining places, etc. So that, I think a lot of that push with a lot of the other villages is happening from the women wanting to keep their husbands at home and looking for a way to do that, to earn money right at home. And tourism is the way to do it.
And the women themselves getting things as well. Oh, sorry, Helen.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you know, we've all been very fortunate to travel all over the world, and in many places when you go to community-led places, sometimes it can really feel quite contrived. That never ever came across to me in Guyana. You know, the impression I really got was that you know, the people wanted tourism as a way of sustaining their current lifestyle, and that came across very, very strongly.
Kate, I've put a link in the chat box for anyone who wants to read that article by Kevin Rushby, which really explains well the benefits as opposed to the flight shame that we were also concerned about last year. So that will tell people in a couple of minutes and really explain the benefits and why people should travel.
Thank you, Tony. And I think that hopefully... Sorry, Kate. But also, like when we were in Alaska, the Canadians kept talking about community tourism. And when I tracked it down, it was a member of the community that had a business. It was actually private enterprise. Our community tourism is owned and operated by the village. The village council is like the board of directors. So it's a little bit different. Thank you, Salvador, for clarifying. I think that's a very important point. And we did have a couple of our kind of colleagues and friends who were from Guyana who were concerned about the impact of tourism on the environment. So I'm really glad that we've been able to kind of cover those topics and cover how the Guyana Tourism Authority and the partners are kind of managing that. One of the, I'm wary of time, so we've probably just got 2 or 3 more questions we can answer before rounding up. I appreciate that probably people are hungry and they're ready to have dinner. But one of the questions we have been asked is the oil exploration. I don't want to ignore it. I think we should touch on it very quickly. Nicola, would you like to start us off on that?
Sure.
How is that? How is the oil exploration in Guyana, which I understand much of it to be offshore at the moment, but how do you see that impacting tourism, and how is that going to enable us to continue to manage tourism in a sustainable way? From Mez and Shaz, I should mention them.
Well, Mez and Shaz, I think you hit it right on the ball there, Kate. It is offshore at the moment, so I think we are very lucky and grateful for that. We've been very fortunate that although it is seen as 2 contrasting industries a lot of times, it's oil and it's conservation and tourism. But a lot of the work that we're doing, we're trying to build a partner with Exxon to understand our points of view, and we understand their points of view as well. We've been very lucky that some of their CSR programs are a bit more tailored towards conservation, and they are a bit more open to understanding our parts of it. And I think a big part of it is to find that balance in our conversation to them, and to also help awareness with a lot of local Guyanese, a lot of travelers and tourism that come here to also benefit from that. I know that many of the exposure Guyana has gotten in the recent years has been because of that oil industry, but for the tourism industry, it also did shed a light to say, hey, oil is here, but there's also a rainforest here. There's also all of these wildlife species here. And to let them understand too that while oil is something that it gives us energy, and I know it's important for a lot of different energies and different purposes as well, there is a lot of study being done worldwide that you do need a more sustainable industry, and for people to understand that tourism is that sustainable industry going forward. I know, and everyone on this call, all of these panelists do have a lot more experience than I do in this particular field, and I know that it's a long road and a long conversation that many people around the world are having, but to see that tourism is the way forward and the future there, we think it's great to have that light shed on it.
Thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to say anything else on that topic before we perhaps round up for the evening? I think we should, a great way to, sorry, yes,
one thing I just wanted to add, I think what we have to do in Guyana is to make sure that the money we earn is used in a sustainable way to make up for the oil industry. And I think that can go a far way to make it a little better and a little more palatable.
Great. And a lot of the content we focused on this evening has been those wonderful experiences of going into the interior and perhaps going down to the Rupununi. We do have a couple of questions about Georgetown. Perhaps for people that don't have the time or the ability, or obviously it's quite expensive to get into the interior. So for people that can just perhaps hop over to Georgetown, or perhaps they're going back to visit family, friends, or they just have a couple of days, could we just highlight a couple of experiences? We've had the Seven Curry tour and the rum tour, of course, but it would be great to hear a few experiences in Georgetown that people can, and even if they're combining with another Caribbean island.
You've got to go to the Backyard Cafe. End of. Market tour followed by Backyard Cafe. That's it.
Great. Salvador, you're on mute.
My city tour wasn't that bad too, Elaine. Come on, you love the manatees.
You were the highlight, Salvador.
Salvador also has a special treat, I've heard. I've never been on one of his trips before, but there is a special spot after the market tour where you have to grab coconut water, and I heard he puts a little something into that coconut water to just add that little kick.
Yes.
Outside of that too, there is the Essequibo circuit that has a lot of nature resorts on that riverbank. It's about an hour drive and commute out of Georgetown. It's a great introduction into those interior locations, and for a lot of the Guyanese too that come home to visit their friends and family, if you do want a bit of that nature but on a weekend or maybe a day trip, that's also a great experience to go there too. My personal favorite, I love coffee. Guyana has a good blend, so even if you take some time and ask your tour operator to show you where you can find that blend, or stop in the Guyana shop as well to have some of that, it's a great experience.
Super, thank you. And Salvador, you seem to be very popular with our viewers this evening. Quite a few of them have been asking for your email address and have been saying how fantastic they are. So I'm sure you're going to be in quite high demand after this webinar. So
he did say it was like speed dating.
Maybe he's better than anything.
We do need to round up, I'm afraid. I'm sure we could chat about Guyana long into the evening. And what I'd like to do to finish off the discussion is I'd like to ask all of our panelists, including Lynn, in just a few words, what is your Guyana highlight? And let's try and keep it to 30 seconds, starting with Lynn.
Oh no! I keep changing my mind. But I guess if you can only, it's all about the nature for me. Oh, the people, it's everything. But if you can only do one thing, Kaito Falls, do as Tony says, stay overnight. it's simple accommodation, but you will have the falls to yourself in the morning. And that is one of the world's most special experiences, I feel.
Thank you, Lynn. We'll move on to you, Cameron.
Yeah, my special experience, there are a lot, but if I was to just dwell on one, I think it would be the experience at Warpook. It has a little bit of everything. You have a little bit of nature, adventure, a culture. Is just a really good mix, and the warmth of the people is just amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen.
Oh, it's so hard. Secret sundowners, I think. Thinking we were going back to the lodge and being dropped off at a beach surrounded by skimmers and macaws and sitting there obviously having a rum. Everything, honestly, I loved it. Just go.
Tony.
Impossible question to answer, but if I had only one place to go tomorrow, Mapari Wilderness Camp, because it's new, untouched, and full of wildlife.
Okay, Nicola.
I am a nature and wildlife girl, but throughout of the couple of times I've been able to visit some of these places, listening to persons in the community speak about their passion and their experiences have been a highlight for me, especially getting to know the guides one-on-one. I remember Rewa, I met a guide named Vivian that talks about his experience from Sarama Stefano, and if ever you get to visit Cayman House, having them speak about the reason why they started their turtle conservation project is a very touching story. It just encompasses a lot that we try to do for the destination, what the destination already offers.
Thank you, Nicola. And finally, Salvador.
Rum. That's all there is to it. The best in the world. And you have to come and taste the difference between the 12 and the 15 and the 21, and the 8-year-old isn't that bad either. And you have to join the club. Are you a 12 or a 15? And yes, it can be the rum.
Thank you very much, Salvador. Thank you once again to our wonderful panelists this evening. From my part, it's an absolute huge privilege to be representing Guyana in the UK. I can't think of a more exciting and fulfilling job. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you for all the questions. I have left my email in the chat box, but we'll be happy to continue the dialogue with anybody. And goodbye until next time, and a virtual round of applause to everybody for joining us. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Stay safe. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Thank you all, and
Thank you all
you'll
for
all be
joining.
getting an email tomorrow. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, dear.